Hey, friends, quick heads up for all the mental health pros out there. Ever thought about making more money without adding more client hours? Well, if so, I've got something really cool for you. I've whipped up a list of 50 smart ideas to boost your income, all tailored for therapists and counselors just like us. Think online courses, digital tools, or even your own wellness product. And guess what? It is totally free. So if you want in, just click the link in the show notes. It's super easy to sign up, and you'll be browsing through those ideas in no time, thinking about all the possibilities. So don't miss out. Click the link in the show notes now, grab that list, and let's shake things up in your practice and your bank account. All right, here's this week's episode. Welcome to the Therapy Show podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Mustard. In each episode, I interview a seasoned and knowledgeable talk therapist from the counseling world to glean valuable insights, techniques, and tools that you can apply to your practice and your life. And if you're considering a career in the counseling field or just want to hear about what it's like to be a talk therapist, then this is the podcast for you. Today, I'm excited to have Michael Cortina, LCSW, the creator of the innovative Cortina method, join me on the podcast. This brain-based methodology is specifically crafted to address trauma and other emotional disturbances effectively without the need for clients to relive their traumatic experiences. In our conversation, Michael dives into how the Cortina method represents a significant paradigm shift in treating emotional and mental health issues. He shares the science behind the method, its development from his dissatisfaction with traditional therapies, and the remarkable success it has achieved, as well as how the method prevents therapist burnout. We'll also explore how this method can be a game changer for both therapists and clients by fostering quick and lasting healing. So join us to gain deep insights into a transformative approach to mental health care. Hey, friends, welcome back to another episode of The Therapy Show. I'm your host, Lisa Mustard, and I'm so excited to welcome Michael Cortina to the podcast. So, welcome, Michael, and it's really great to have you here.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I so appreciate being able to connect with you today.
Yes, I'm so excited, and I know our mutual friend Stephanie Lincoln, who was actually on the podcast early April, I believe. I have to remember. She mentioned your name because I told her about the training I was doing in hypnotherapy and hypnosis, and she said, "Oh, you've got to meet my friend Michael," and that's how we connected. So, can you share with our audience a little bit about who you are, what you do, and how you help people?
Sure. Thank you. So the Cortina method, I'll start with that. So the Cortina method is a brain-based methodology to resolve PTSD
Mhm.
and other disturbing emotions, thoughts, and behaviors without anybody having to relive any pain. It also prevents therapist burnout, which is huge in our field. So it's a whole paradigm shift in the way of connecting with and treating people. Briefly, by just background, so I'm a traditionally trained therapist. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, licensed clinical addiction counselor. I did all the things they taught me to do in school, the CBT and the insight-oriented therapies and, Gestalt and Bowenian and all these different things. And I became a little dissatisfied with the outcomes. I mean, if you look up the outcome, the effectiveness rate of outpatient psychotherapy, it's not overwhelmingly impressive. And my practice back then was falling within those realms. I was having some successes, nowhere near as many as I wanted for the people that I was serving. And then if there was success, it took a long time. And then if anybody had been through any stuff, which so many people have been, trauma is just crazy prevalent. Then the process itself was grueling, and I was going through like a rainforest worth of Kleenex in my office. And I thought, I almost left the field. I started a side hustle. I started to pivot and then started doing my own research, started looking at things that were sort of like way outside the box, finding out what's really going on with the brain, and started to adapt and make some changes in practice.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Very cool. I mean, I'm super curious. I'm so curious. I want to know. I want to know what it is. Because I have a very similar story. I know we were chatting ahead of time, with my work, I went through a really big period of burnout. And one of the ways that I also started a side hustle, which would be this podcast. And which is great, and I think it's renewed my interest in the work and in this field. So I'm so excited to connect with people like you, where we have a similar history of, we want to help people, but the burnout is real. I mean, how many sessions, you just get to this point where you're like, is this helping? Like, like talking about this, and they're looking at you and you're like, it's supposed to help, and sometimes it does help. What the There's different methods for different types of people, and results are going to vary. So how did you come up with your method? Like, what sparked you to try it, or to, you know, try something different with the traditional trainings that you've had?
Sure. It's a great question. So, ironically, my side hustle was income property, was real estate. I mean, I was going a completely different direction.
Right.
And one summer, picked up a duplex. That the duplex was just a hot mess as far as the physical condition. It was just bad shape. And worked on it all summer. Thankfully, I had a great mentor because I wasn't so handy. I was more of just like the labor. Tell me what to do and I'll do it. And so worked on it all summer. And at the end of the summer, it was this really beautiful. I mean, it wasn't like Taj Mahal or anything, but it was a very nice place. It was a place that in good conscience you could put families. And I remembered the before condition, not so good, putting work into it, and then the after condition and how nice it was and how it was happy to put it up for rent. And I thought this is what I want my clinical work because I wasn't getting it. Again, there were some successes, but just for the people that I was serving, nowhere near as many as I wanted. And I thought, this is what I want. This is what I want my clinical work. And so just before I left the field altogether and just went full on real estate, I started looking into things. I would end up in a obscure conference room on the third floor of a library in Chicago at like 7 o'clock on a Wednesday night, just going to, somebody had this little mastermind, this little thing going on. And it wasn't really out there like that. So we'd meet in these different places. And so I was learning things that quite frankly, they didn't teach me in school. And all the trainees that I have, what I'm learning is, most of them are saying, yes, they don't teach you this in school. And so I started, doing my own research, looking up what's, neuroscience, what's the latest and greatest, what's happening with the brain, how can we take these things and build it into a protocol such that the outcome is that people are getting resolution. It's happening in a way that they don't have to relive or re-experience the pain, and it's happening very efficiently.
Mm.
These are some obstacles. These are barriers that keep people out of treatment. You know, there's a lot of people hurting out there. There's really high suicide rates. You look at it in the veteran community, there's high suicide rates. And some of these barriers are, I have to talk about this stuff. I have to relive the pain. Takes a long time to get in. So throughput and the impact that that has on access to services and effectiveness rates that are marginal.
Mhm.
And so I said, we got to change the game. And that's so it was born out of, quite frankly, dissatisfaction and desire to want to do better for ultimately those that I was serving. They were always top of mind.
Mhm.
But then it sort of evolved into this thing like, hey, let's change the field. Let's really roll this thing out and scale it.
Nice. Yeah. So you have a whole training that you've put together for clinicians so they can learn your method if that's something that they want to practice, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Cool.
And part of a quick little behind the scenes and the name there, by the way, is I've been to a lot of trainings as, it sounds like you have as well.
Yeah.
And, I've seen really good trainers and I've seen some not so much. I've seen some that, maybe look to hold the deck very close to the chest. And it's kind of like, I feel like there's something they're not sharing, or maybe there's some trade secrets, or there's something missing. So my my vision is to create an army of healers who will heal, inspire, and invigorate 1 million people with unparalleled outcomes and optimal guest service. The only way to do, I can't do that alone. And so the only way to do that is to train others to do this work.
Mhm.
And I thought, I'm giving away all the secrets, all the little, I'm not hanging on to anything.
Mhm.
So it was a way of putting positive pressure on myself to make sure that my trainees have the highest level of competencies and skill acquisition. My name is on this thing.
Mhm.
So it's like, give it all away. They'll see some, whoa, what did you do there? Or how did you get that to happen? Or why did you do that? They're going to, everything, just give
Yeah.
it away so that they can do extraordinary work.
Yeah, and I hate to ask this question because I think a lot of clinicians out there are like, well, what is it? What if you could if you could tell us a little bit more like what types of techniques did you pull into it and how would you describe it to a therapist who's saying, okay, tell me more. I'm EMDR trained, I'm CBT, like I have all these trainings, but what makes the Cortina method different? And where do you draw from your different, I guess, theories or methods if you draw from others?
Oh, that's such a great question. Thank you for asking that. And,
Sure.
'cause sometimes I just, yeah, that really helps steer it, I think, in a really productive direction. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Um, so a couple things. One is the the neuroscience literature and evidence is huge. So one of the buzzwords you'll hear out there is called memory reconsolidation.
Hmm.
So memory reconsolidation, the really high level explanation for that, elevator sort of pitch explanation is that, let's say you have an Excel document and it has all these rows and columns with data in there. So you open up that Excel document and you make some changes to it, and then you hit the save button. That's basically what's going on with the ultimate computer, the human brain, so that the way the brain processes the information related to the event that transpired, which now is being stored as a memory, more specifically a trauma memory, you get the brain to reprocess that, hit the save button, and it just no longer has the impact on the individual. Another thing that differentiates it is we know now that trauma can be stored in the body. So in the Cortina method, there's actual physicality. We actually get up out of the chairs, and there's going to be very strategic and intentional movements so that we can resolve any trauma that might be lingering in the body. What else? Found the quickest, fastest forms of neuroplasticity, the way in which the brain updates, changes, neural paths, connections, functions, and built that right into the protocol. So if one was a fly on the wall and they say, what would this look like? If I was sitting in a visit, so there's no medications, there's no equipment, there's no, light bars, electrodes, hookups. It's a talking experiential process whereby the practitioner is going to do probably about 90% of the talking. I mean, we need to hear from our guests in the beginning to get a good, clear sense of what there is to resolve. But at a certain point, that shifts. And then it's us doing the majority of the talking, the remainder of the visit, probably about 90% of it. You would see techniques that look very meditative or relaxing in nature. So there's ways of calming the nervous system. You would see the physical movements, which are very, I mean, that could range, from every ordinary movements that anybody might know and understand to sort of very unique kind of movements. And lastly, you would see a lot of very strategic brain-based language being used. Brain-based language. Our brain can respond one way or another
Mhm.
to language and how it's used and how it resonates. And so there's very strategic use of language in a way that's optimal for the brain. So this is what it would look like, a conversation between two people that eventually becomes a little more one-sided. You'd see some metaphors being used, and all of these other things that I referenced. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. So how many sessions would somebody usually have with a Cortina method practitioner?
Yeah, so Lisa, these outcomes
Uh-huh.
are happening sometimes in as little as a single visit.
Yeah.
And I've realized doing, lunch and learns and working booths at conferences and doing, speaking engagements, there would probably be a greater percentage of people who are like really like, wow, if I said, it takes 5 to 7 sessions.
Right.
because, because it sounds a little bit kind of like one eyebrow raised, like how can this?
Mhm.
But I really thought about this for a long time, and I'm like, no, I'm not going to change the message. No, this is what's happening. And you will hear it from people. You will hear, there's lots of testimonials
Mhm.
and endorsements out there. I tell people I can't make it up because with people's consent, with their permission, I film my work.
Mhm.
So at training, I say, listen, you're going to see somebody get years of trauma resolved. You're going to see it happen before they walk out the door or get off the screen if it's telehealth. You're going to see there be no angst, anger, anxiety, tears. In fact, you might even see some laughter. And I can't make it up because it's all on film.
Right.
And so now, does that mean that people can't receive more than one TCM, the acronym for the Cortina method? Because we need more acronyms, right?
Right, right.
So does that mean that people can't receive more than one TCM visit? Absolutely not. Many people do. And, so there's a lot of application for how this is used, and sometimes it makes great sense to provide more than one visit. I only put that out there to say that it can happen in as little as a single visit.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So this is fascinating to me. I love this what you're sharing. And I think so many people would love, I mean, we see our clients in so much pain and so much angst, and we're wondering, well, how come it's not working? Or what am I not doing correctly? I'm doing all the protocols. I'm doing what they taught me in grad school. And I'm just fascinated by this. And, I probably a couple years ago would have been like, I don't know what this guy's talking about. But I'll tell you, since the past 2 years, just by me kind of opening my mind and my heart to learning about new or different approaches to health and wellness, I mean, I'm just, I'm on board. Like, sign me up. I want to come learn that, your method. So EMDR, we all say, is like the gold standard, or they say, I don't even know who they are, but people will swear by it. They think it's the gold standard. Are you trained in EMDR also, or did you go that route at one point with your
So
practice?
I, I have had some
Mhm.
training in EMDR. I am not, certified level 1, level 2
Mhm.
in EMDR.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I was just curious. Have you had therapists who are trained at EMDR take your method, and what do they report?
Absolutely. I've had people from a few of the, other approaches out there that are, talked about. EMDR obviously being the most probably well known. And so what they say, and what I've learned about EMDR, and then but I'll tell you what they say, the therapists who've trained in both EMDR and TCM. Well, I'll start with a funny quote. So one of the EMDR therapists after training in TCMs, and this is one of the ones who like used a light bar,
Mhm.
said, my light bar is now a clothes hanger. You know, I
Really?
I just I throw the clothes on it. I will not do EMDR anymore.
Uh-huh.
The only way I'll do EMDR is if a client calls me and says, I want EMDR, don't even talk to me about any other methodology. If you don't give me EMDR, I'm going to go to the therapist down the street who's going to do prolonged exposure, and which is horrifying, my bias, my opinion.
Mhm.
And so then I'll do it. But otherwise, I tell people, let's go the TCM route.
Are you tired of sitting in front of a computer to watch hours and hours and hours of recorded trainings so you can get your continuing education requirements fulfilled? Look, I was, and I decided to do something about it. I have created convenient on the go learning that's completely audio based. I call them pod courses. Well, what's a pod course? Think of it as a hybrid between a captivating podcast and a self study course tailored for you, my perpetually busy counselor friend. In my pod courses, you can explore subjects like addiction issues, ethics and values in counseling, holistic approaches, and much more, all while you're on the move. Whether you're commuting, jogging, relaxing at home, whatever, pod courses blend your favorite podcasts with enriching self study courses, perfect for those always on the go. how it works. So tune in anywhere, anytime. Enjoy the pod courses on any device wherever podcasts are available. Quiz yourself, solidify your understanding with a brief quiz after each pod course. Then, last but not least, certify your smarts. Achieve a score of at least 80% to receive a certificate of completion. If you're curious to learn more about my pod course offerings, head to the link lisamustard.com/pod courses, or just click the link in the show notes. And right now, the special offer is you can gain unlimited access to all pod courses, that's 16 contact hours for just $38. Hurry up because this exclusive price is available for a limited time only. Pod courses are brought to you with pride by Mustard Consulting LLC, your trusted NBCC ASEP provider.
So what they say, there's a difference in terms of efficiency.
Mhm.
EMDR can be, 9, 12 visits, maybe 6. There's that distinct difference. The other difference is that EMDR, one has to, again, deal with some level of exposure. There's some level of reliving that pain. There's even a step in there. It's called resource installation. In the EMDR protocol, it's where you're building in resources. You're essentially teaching people the coping skills for the inevitable pain that's going to show up in the process. The last thing I've heard from people is, there's different ways of doing the bilateral stimulation, but, a very common one is the visual, sort of the back and forth with the eyes.
Mhm.
And I've heard some people say that that's really just kind of messes with them. It's sort of, a bit difficult on the brain and so forth, and the impact that has on them. So there's some real differentiators. Again, I would add probably, the physical component of TCM, where we get out of the chairs, strategic movements.
Mhm.
So these are some of the differences, and that people who've trained in both are sharing with me.
Yeah. Okay. That's really neat. That's really cool. So, I mean, it could be one session is helpful to people, or if they need more, then, it sounds like they would, if they need more sessions, do you take them through the method again, or do you just talk to them about what happened in the last session you did with them? Or, you know what I mean? Like, do you continue to do the protocol with them?
Yeah, so the protocol is rooted in these neuroscience finding,
Mm.
fastest form of neuroplasticity, memory reconsolidation. So there's real value in the protocol. And what I tell trainees is before the person's big toe even enters into the room, the deck is already stacked for success because of this protocol.
Mhm.
Now, within the protocol, there's also room for practitioner, therapist, counselor creativity and bringing sort of their own personality into it. Because let's say we're doing this step of the protocol, well, there could be 23 different ways to do it.
Mhm. Okay.
And so I might do it this way. And so we mentioned Stephanie. Stephanie might do it that way, and you
Mhm.
might do it this way. And all of it is fine and maintaining fidelity to the protocol. So it's really this nice balance of a protocol rooted in neuroscience with still room for therapist creativity and sort of their own personality and fun. Um, so people would come in, and if I could too, I don't know if I've ever talked about this on a podcast, but I'm feeling to say this, so
Mhm.
I may just for a moment
Sure.
on sort of the business side of things, because I've had some interesting interactions with people on that side of the fence. So I'll just say this too. Some people say, well, geez, what would that do to it might decimate my income. It might,
I was gonna
um,
bring that up, but I'm glad you brought it up because go ahead, go for it. Let's talk about it.
yeah. So here's what I'll say.
Mhm.
If you were to go see an outpatient doctor for a family visits, or if you were to go get neurosurgery, both of those are under the umbrella of healthcare.
Mhm.
Yet there's going to be a very different price point when the bills come in.
Mhm.
One's going to be substantially higher. And so what I constantly impress upon my trainees, I have their backs. They're doing crazy, extraordinary work. I constantly try to impress upon them to see their value.
Mhm.
They are doing what truly few people on the planet can do.
Mhm.
They're like unicorns. There's value to that.
Right.
And so I tell them, you
Mhm.
know, people will invest. I
Mhm.
mean, we've treated people, I think, on 4 continents, 7 countries, 33 states, and Puerto Rico, because it's not a state or a
Right.
country. Um, and people will invest. So, what a TCM practitioner can make in one visit with one person, it might take a therapist who's doing, you know, traditional therapy. It might take them 5, 7, 8 people to make what a TCM therapist can see for one person.
Right.
So, so it's interesting because you don't have to have as high a volume. Your effectiveness rate is way higher. That's a satisfier. And people are going to talk about you. They are going when you get this done for them,
Yeah.
they're going to share that. So if somebody were to come back for another TCM visit, thank you for letting us do
Sure.
that little segue. If somebody were to come back, most times most times it's to address something else. It's to address maybe something like guilt or a phobia or
Mhm.
anxiety or a limiting belief.
Right.
Overwhelmingly, that's the case. Let's say the trauma didn't get resolved in that first visit, then absolutely they could come back for a second visit. And while you can still do the protocol, you're going to be doing different things within the protocol
Mhm.
to create a different experience.
Sure.
Because the first experience took it so far, let's say it's 75% resolved after one visit. That's great. And yet not quite as good as we want it for people. So let's say that's where it's at. Well, sure, they could come back and then, you know, we could look to clean up the rest of that. And, you know, we'll be doing some things that'll be different to look to get it across the finish line all the way.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. And I appreciate your honesty about the value of what a clinician can do or what a practitioner can do for their you call it guest or client. I feel like that's something that's overlooked because I know a lot of therapists are like, well, if I just do one session, then what do I do the rest of the day? How do I earn my income? But it's not just it's not the traditional mindset or the traditional model of how to charge for your services. And I agree with you because what you're doing is so effective and efficient that people will pay for what they want and what they need. If the pain is high enough for them, the price point, it doesn't, it's okay. You can charge for that and what you're doing because I mean you're not selling them on something that isn't working, right? You're not I so I understand and I do understand the mindset of the therapist, especially the ones that, we charge by our hour of time and if we're not booking that client the next week or in 2 weeks, then how do we fill that spot or where's it going to go? But I really liked how you framed how this works. And so I want to encourage people to check out your method. I know Stephanie speaks very highly of it. I know she has used it in her work. She is a trauma therapist. I know that she feels like it is life-changing. So how do people learn more about the Cortina method? What does the training look like? And if you could share like what is it a program and then you got to do clinical hours and supervision? Like how does it all work?
Sure. So people could find out more by going to my website. So that's michaelcortina.com.
Okay.
Michael is AEL,
Okay.
Michael. So michaelcortina.com. You know, and if anyone wanted to reach out to me, you can do that through my website, but I'm also on, you know, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. And so the next training is coming up actually May 17th through the 19th.
Okay.
And that's going to be our next cohort of the Army of Healers that's coming through. It's going to be a phenomenal training because this location in particular has a lot of already trained TCM practitioners who come back for training. And so what that means is the mix, it already is, and I suspect will continue to grow in that capacity,
Mhm.
is a mix of new people coming in with people who've already been trained. So I'm running the training, but then out there in the training group are people, it's their first training ever, but then they're mixing with people, some of them who've been training with me for years, others maybe a year or two. And so it's a really rich learning environment, particularly when we get into the breakout groups
Okay.
and the skill acquisition and practice to have those kind of resources in the group. I have such gratitude for that.
Awesome.
So
Where is it?
yeah, it's going to be in Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Okay.
And there will be a Zoom option. There is a Zoom option.
Okay.
People sometimes prefer in person, which is wonderful. And yet there is an option to attend by way of Zoom.
Okay.
I have a block of rooms that are available, at a discounted rate for those coming in person. Those are first come, first serve. And so, yeah, it's pretty intensive training, So Friday, the 17th, we go 9 to 8,
Okay.
Saturday, 9 to 8, Sunday, 9 to 5. It's very high energy, multimodality. There's a lecture, there's discussion, there's film, as I mentioned, where you'll see multiple films of the work being done. There's breakout groups, and we don't role play. We do real stuff so that people are already building the competencies and that skill acquisition I talked about. Inevitably, there ends up, well, if history is a guide, I can't predict the future, but if history is a guide, there ends up being a live demonstration because a lot of times people are like, do me, do me. And,
Yeah.
and so, which is a really rich learning environment too, because what happens is I'll either do that myself personally or I'll invite another trainee up to already start facilitating while I sit right by their side and personally coach them.
Oh, cool.
So somebody's getting something resolved. One of the trainees, perhaps, if I'm not, doing it myself, is already, practicing the skills while
Mm.
they're getting one-on-one coaching, while the whole group is observing it in real time. So it's a really rich learning environment.
Cool.
There's also ongoing video training that happens post the 3-day training for 10 months. There's one video per month that's hosted on a platform. So it's there morning, noon, or night to accommodate people's schedules. So that's like sustainable, dripped out content for ongoing learning and sustainability. I will also we get on a couple of group cohort calls. Those are practice building consultation calls.
Okay.
And I tell the trainees those calls will be as long or as short as you guys have questions. Again, my name's on this thing. So my commitment is to give them everything they need on those calls for their practice.
Very cool. I love it. I'm like, sign me up. I just was looking at my schedule in May to see if I was free that weekend. I don't know if I can make it to Indiana, but I can watch on Zoom. I mean, I'll do what I have to do. That sounds fabulous. Okay,
Right
so
on.
if people are interested, we'll put all the links in the show notes. You guys can go and I know you've got testimonials on your site because I was already looking at your site. You have people who, practitioners who are using this and what they're saying. Is there anything else that you want our listeners to know about the method or about, the training that maybe you haven't mentioned yet? Anything?
Sure, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Yes, and there's also more testimonials on my LinkedIn page.
Okay.
So the reason I take an extra note to mention that versus the ones on my website is because those are recommendations provided by both people who've received the service and professionals who've been trained in it.
Okay.
And from LinkedIn, if somebody wanted to reach out to them directly, it's like that access is there. What I would say to anybody who's considering getting the Cortina method to be a recipient of it is if it sounds like too good to be true or you're not so sure about this, what I would say is, what do you have to lose? There's only upside potential. The worst thing that has ever happened in providing a TCM visit to somebody is it didn't work.
Mm.
It didn't work. Nobody's ever died and nobody's gotten worse. So the worst thing that's happened is it just hasn't worked.
Mhm.
The flip side is we have a 90% effectiveness rate. So the
Wow.
odds are stacked in the favor. So I can say that. And to me, that means two things. One is full transparency. It's not 100%. I
Mhm.
mean, nothing is. Anybody
Right.
tells you something's 100%, watch out anyway.
Mhm.
The second thing it shows me is that it has a higher effectiveness rate than anything I've ever seen, studied, or practiced in the field. Training to anybody who's considering getting trained in this, I would say this is an absolute investment. I see therapists, counselors, coaches, I see this change people's lives. I mean, burnout goes away. People are energized when they do this work
Mhm.
because you're going to learn different ways of taking in information, what I call higher order listening. You're going to learn ways where you don't feel like you got hit in the stomach with a sledgehammer after, the heaviness of what people have been through.
Mhm.
So it's a game changer in terms of energy, life satisfaction, for those who are focused on the business, income potential, and decreased having to turn and burn. And again, feel free to reach out, ask any questions that you have. This thing is changing the way we practice. And sometimes change can be a scary word, and I won't hide it. It's going to be a paradigm shift. So if you're thinking about coming for like confirmation bias or stuff you already learned, that's not going to happen at this training. It's going to be about the exact opposite, a 180 of what we get trained to do in maybe traditional talk therapy. But it is truly a game changer for your practice, for your clients. I call them guests, for your clients. And that's what comes to mind to say.
Well, that's awesome. Well, I will put all the links in the show notes, you guys. Definitely check out Michael's the Cortina method and reach out to him if you have questions. This has just been such a great conversation. Thank you so much for coming onto the podcast.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Please note that the Therapy Show with Lisa Mustard is for informational and entertainment purposes only, and not a substitute for professional medical or mental health advice. Always consult with your therapist, doctor, or physician before implementing any suggestions from the show. The Therapy Show with Lisa Mustard is edited and engineered by Chelsea Weaver. If you're looking to start a podcast or ready to take the editing off of your plate, be sure to visit chelseaweaverpodcasting.com. Well, that wraps up another episode of the Therapy Show with Lisa Mustard. I know there are hundreds of thousands of podcasts out there, and I'm thankful you've chosen to listen to mine.
Be sure to visit lisamustard.com to access the show notes and discover more fantastic content.
And I'd be grateful if you subscribe to the show. Thank you.